As I made my way to the restaurant for the get-together, I noticed a well-known colleague standing by themselves. She had no umbrella and was drenched from the rain. "What's the matter?" I said, "Let's go inside," but she remained motionless and appeared to be about to cry.
She said they said that anyone with only a high school degree should just go home. Emily talked to me while I was speechless.
I've persevered and put in a lot of effort over the years, but ultimately my education makes me a laughingstock. With tears running down her cheeks, Emily bowed her head. This must have been a long-term hardship for her. I couldn't abandon her in this state. "Will you wait here for a minute?" I said softly. "It will not be long." I then gave my handkerchief and umbrella to Emily. I opened the restaurant door. The Trinity Bank staff was making a lot of noise inside because the space was reserved. Then I located the individual I was seeking and adamantly said, "I'm shutting a $2 billion account. My name is Steve Haynes. I have prioritized my career throughout my life, and this year I turned 55. I'm still unmarried at this age because of that. All I have is a high school degree. When I was very little, my father died. My mother worked hard to make ends meet while raising me alone. I couldn't tell her that I wanted to attend college. In light of this, I started working at Trinity Bank as soon as I finished from high school. Before leaving in my 30s, I spent years working there as a banker. I couldn't compete with college graduates because I only had a high school education. Since our tasks and responsibilities were so dissimilar, I made the decision to acquire specific talent and advance instead of remaining at the bank. I made the decision to change my ways and put a lot of effort into my studies to earn my certified tax accountant status. I now own and operate a private tax office. My relationship with Trinity Bank was not entirely severed, notwithstanding my departure. I am regularly invited as an external lecturer at Trinity Bank's estate tax preparation seminars, which are regularly held at its branches. The first branch of Trinity Bank is the branch where I'm most frequently invited to do these seminars. It mostly caters to business clients and affluent individuals and is situated reasonably near the city core. Having multiple tax consultants like myself on call is standard practice for a large bank like Trinity.
But at the first branch, I'm the only one holding workshops.
This is for a specific reason, but as a result, I have developed a strong bond with the first branch staff. I intend to continue having a positive working relationship with Trinity Bank as a tax consultant. I had that thought. However, a turning point came my way. It was the reassignment of the assistant branch manager who I've always relied on. I frequently coordinated with this assistant branch manager regarding seminars. I've met the branch manager a few times, but he's often away on business trips and rarely present. As a result, the assistant branch manager had been working hard as the de facto acting manager of the first branch. Trinity Bank conducts regular staff rotations, but the current assistant branch manager had been at the first branch ever since I began giving seminars there. He must have been at the first branch for at least 10 years. The assistant branch manager was someone who paid attention to every detail and would suddenly step in to help if anything went wrong during the seminar.
So I was honestly a bit sad about his transfer, but I was also hopeful about the new assistant branch manager.
2 weeks later, I headed to the first branch. I had heard from the former assistant branch manager over the phone that the new one had officially arrived. When the automatic doors of the branch opened, I saw a familiar face.
"Hello, Emily." "Steve, welcome."
When our eyes met, Emily greeted me with a bright smile. Emily was a newcomer who had joined the bank 6 months ago and worked as a lobby assistant. Her primary role was to greet customers, help with reception, and support their transactions. At Trinity Bank, new female employees typically start in the lobby assistant role and gradually learn the different aspects of their job over time. I heard that Emily joined Trinity Bank right after graduating from high school. This was because she had no parents and lived only with her elderly grandparents. To support them on their modest pension, she chose to enter the workforce instead of continuing her education. Emily is a fresh-faced, charming young woman. Since I'm also a high school graduate, I felt a sense of kinship with her because we share the same educational background. Seeing her always working hard with a bright smile reminded me to return to my roots and give my work my best effort too.
Recalling these things, I spoke to Emily.
The new assistant branch manager transferred in last week, right? I'd like to introduce myself. Can you call him over for me? The previous assistant branch manager had already informed him that I would be visiting today. Since there wasn't a specific time set, I decided to visit during business hours. However, Emily's expression clouded over. The assistant branch manager. Michael Keller, right? Could you wait just a moment? She looked visibly nervous, almost as though she was afraid of something. I couldn't help but ask her what was wrong. Oh, sorry about that. Did I catch you at a bad time? If so, I can come back later. The new assistant branch manager had just transferred in, so if he was busy, it couldn't be helped. When I said that, Emily hurriedly responded.
No, I'll go check right now.
With that, Emily quickly disappeared into the back office. 15 minutes later, Emily returned with a man in tow. The man's expression was clearly unpleasant. You're the tax consultant who's been running our seminars, right? I'm busy, so I'd appreciate it if you could keep this brief. I glanced at his name tag. It read Michael Keller. So this must be the new assistant branch manager. However, this kind of rude attitude right off the bat was unbelievable. It's not normal for someone to speak so bluntly to an external consultant like me. I gave a wry smile and replied, No, I just stopped by to introduce myself. I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm busy, so...
Michael said only that, then turned on his heel and went back into the office. Oh, Michael, the assistant branch manager. Emily hurried after Michael, but what he said next was shocking. Don't call me unless it's urgent. This is why I can't stand high school graduates, because they can't make quick decisions. I'm so sorry. Seeing Emily apologize to Michael with a pale face, I felt genuinely sorry for her. If I hadn't asked her to call him, she wouldn't have been scolded so unfairly by Michael. However, the former assistant branch manager must have informed Michael about my visit. The former assistant was a diligent person, so there's no way there was a communication error. Feeling uneasy about the situation, I silently promised myself that I'd find a way to make it up to Emily. Some time passed, and I found myself back at the first branch again. It was the day of a seminar that I was scheduled to lead. Since the seminar had already been arranged with the former assistant branch manager, everything went smoothly. However, I hadn't had any discussions with Michael regarding the seminars scheduled for the following months. Normally, a meeting should be held at least 2 weeks in advance, but I hadn't received any information from Michael. Seminars aren't something that can be thrown together at the last minute. The specific themes were always provided by the bank. Based on that, I prepare materials for the participants and decide what I talk about. So if I wasn't informed ahead of time, I wouldn't be able to get everything done in time. The seminar attendees were all wealthy individuals, and their main concern was how to pass their assets to their spouses or children without incurring heavy taxes. That's why I always spend a lot of time, even in between my main work, carefully preparing the seminar materials. As I was about to head home after the seminar, Emily approached me with a bright smile.
Steve, great job today. The seminar was so informative. Thank you, Emily, for all your support.
At each seminar, female staff members would help distribute materials to the attendees, serve refreshments, and provide overall support. When the previous assistant branch manager was in charge, he would often stand at the back of the room to handle any challenging participants. However, the basic support duties were always carried out by the female staff. Ever since Emily started working at the first branch, she has always played a key support role during my seminars. Once again, Emily was subtly stepping in to support the participants.
As we were chatting pleasantly, a slow, dry clap echoed from behind us. Oh, Michael. When I turned around, I saw Michael standing by the seminar room door.
Wow! What an amazing seminar! Michael exaggeratedly praised in a loud voice. But I knew he hadn't attended even a minute of it. I glanced around the room several times, so there was no mistake.
As I wondered what he was trying to pull, Michael continued.
It's such a fantastic seminar, and yet it's a shame that this is the last one.
What? I was stunned by what I just heard, unable to process his words.
Emily, equally taken aback, asked Michael, "What do you mean by last? Steve has been hosting seminars exclusively for the first branch all this time."
Her face clearly showed confusion and sadness.
Michael clicked his tongue in annoyance. "A high school graduate questioning me, huh? Whatever. From now on, another tax consultant will be handling the seminars."
Why the sudden change? I asked.
Michael smirked and curled his lips into a grin. "There's a consultant I've got connections with from my previous branch. It's easier for me to work with him. So, you're out of the picture."
With a loud, mocking laugh, Michael walked away.
"That's way too disrespectful to Steve. The first branch has been benefiting from his expertise for so long," Emily murmured quietly, voicing exactly what I was feeling. "The first branch had always valued me, and in return I had prioritized working with them. However, I couldn't help but think that this relationship might be coming to an end." When I was openly showing my distress toward Michael, I received a call from him at my office. When I answered, it was an invitation to a social gathering hosted by the first branch. "You've done a lot for us, after all, so I figured I'd invite you as a farewell gesture. Of course, your replacement, the new tax consultant, will be there too. He's a smart guy, so I bet you'll end up making a fool of yourself." Michael laughed loudly, taunting me over the phone. Normally I wouldn't even want to attend something like that, but I had a long-standing relationship with the first branch.
"All right, I'll attend," I reluctantly agreed.
Then came the day of the social gathering. As I headed to the restaurant, I noticed a familiar bank staff member standing alone outside. She looked somewhat downcast. She was soaking wet in the rain without an umbrella.
"Emily!" I hurried over to her in a rush. "Steve!" Emily looked at me and murmured softly.
"What's wrong?" "Let's head inside," I urged her, but she didn't move, her expression on the verge of tears. If she stayed like this, she was bound to catch a cold.
Noticing my concern, Emily finally spoke.
"Michael, the assistant branch manager, told me that high school graduates aren't welcome. He said the social gathering is only for those with a college degree or higher," Emily muttered quietly.
"That's awful."
I was at a loss for words as memories of Michael's behavior came flooding back. A single tear slid down Emily's cheek as she continued. "He even said something about you. He said a high school-educated tax consultant is unreliable. He bragged that the tax consultant with a master's degree from his previous branch is far superior. I thought you might face the same treatment if you went inside, so I stayed here to warn you." I was speechless at what Emily had just shared. I had always been bothered by Michael's attitude, but I never imagined he looked down on me this much. Seeing Emily standing in the rain waiting for me all this time filled me with guilt.
Emily spoke, breaking the silence.
"I couldn't. I've been holding it in and working hard all this time, but in the end, I'm always looked down on because of my education." She lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. She must have been through so much pain. "There was no way I could just leave her like this. Besides, I didn't want to walk away from the first branch after everything, letting Michael have the last word." I quickly sent an email to a certain someone. Then I spoke to Emily.
"Can you wait here for a minute? This won't take long." I handed her my umbrella and handkerchief.
"What?" Emily looked confused and tried to stop me. She was probably worried because I'm just a consultant hired by the bank. Michael, as the assistant branch manager, held the second highest authority at the first branch, just below the branch manager. But I didn't need that kind of worry. I brushed off Emily's attempt to stop me and pushed the door open. Since the restaurant was reserved, Trinity Bank employees were inside, laughing, drinking, and having a great time. I looked around, but the branch manager was nowhere in sight. "Hey, Michael. I found the person I was looking for and declared firmly, I'm closing an account worth $20 billion. Michael burst out laughing at my words. "What the heck are you talking about?" And it seemed that she had heard what I said. Emily, looking flustered, rushed into the restaurant.
Steve, what's going on?
Well, the amount must have sounded absurd to her. It was an unimaginable figure, and she was visibly shaken. However, Michael showed no reaction at all. He was laughing so hard that he was holding his stomach. My stomach hurts from laughing so much. And $20 billion? That's a pretty bold move, Mr. Consultant. But I know the truth. You're just a high school-educated tax consultant. Michael shouted triumphantly, pointing a finger at me.
Then he began praising the man standing next to him.
This tax consultant right here is a master's graduate. He's in a whole different league compared to some shady, unqualified consultant. The tax consultant next to Michael appeared to be around my age. When he saw my face, he froze for a moment, looking startled before his expression turned awkward. It seemed he had realized who I was right away. Shady, huh? It looks like the tax consultant next to you knows exactly who I am. I chuckled and glanced toward the man. His face was visibly tense, but Michael didn't notice the change in his demeanor. A high school graduate tax consultant is a rare breed, isn't it? Probably famous in the industry for that reason alone. I mean, you can't even take the exam without a college degree, right? I wonder how much money you had to throw around to make that happen. Michael laughed as if he was thoroughly enjoying himself. Meanwhile, the consultant beside him was growing increasingly pale.
I straightened my posture and firmly addressed Michael.
I did pass the certification exam properly, you know. The truth is, you don't need a college degree to take the tax consultant exam. I had gained plenty of experience during my time at Trinity Bank, so I met the eligibility requirement. Then I added, I've also published several books and frequently serve as a speaker for tax consultant seminars. I'd say I'm more knowledgeable than your average consultant.
What? A high school graduate?
Michael stared at me, dumbfounded. At that moment, the tax consultant standing next to Michael timidly spoke up in my defense.
Michael, that comment was really out of line. Steve often appears in tax industry publications. He's a very well-known expert in this field.
What? Is that true? Michael's composure cracked as he turned to the consultant.
I earned my registration by having some exam sections waived because of my master's degree, but Steve, as a high school graduate, passed all 5 sections of the exam on his own. He's not lacking in intelligence.
All 5 sections?
Michael's face turned pale in an instant. The person he had looked down on so much had passed a notoriously difficult certification through the official process. It was no wonder he was shaken. Michael, you seem obsessed with academic credentials, but people are more than just their education, I told him directly. You should apologize to Steve, don't you think? Honestly, his seminars are far more valuable than mine. His explanations of tax reforms are always spot on. I wouldn't be surprised if some attendees come specifically to hear him speak, the tax consultant said to Michael, clearly worried for the seminar attendees. Someone who not only kept up with the latest tax regulations, but also authored multiple books, would naturally be more trustworthy than just a consultant with a master's degree. Michael fell silent for a moment before he began to pout like a child. I didn't hear anything about that from the previous assistant branch manager. And isn't it irresponsible not to explain your background properly? Saying that, Michael tried to shift the blame onto me. He was clearly desperate to avoid taking the blame himself. Michael stubbornly refused to apologize. Just as I was thinking I didn't want to waste any more time dealing with him, someone arrived. The restaurant door opened and the branch manager stepped inside, glaring directly at Michael.
Michael, it looks like you've been doing whatever you please, haven't you?
Branch manager, I can explain. Michael was visibly shaking, stumbling over his words. The branch manager shot him a cold remark. Explain? Steve is a major client with assets worth $20 billion and a renowned tax consultant who has been hosting our seminars. Treating someone like that so poorly is utterly unacceptable. Michael was at a complete loss for his words. Ignoring Michael, the branch manager turned to me and said, Steve, I sincerely apologize for the unacceptable behavior of our assistant branch manager. Michael's face twisted in shock as he watched the branch manager apologize. Branch manager, you're apologizing to a high school graduate? That's too much.
Even now, Michael couldn't stop his elitist remarks. Michael, I believe that kind of comment is highly inappropriate. Emily instinctively stepped in to defend me. The other bank employees around us were also bewildered by Michael's blatantly inappropriate behavior. They glanced at him with puzzled expressions, whispering among themselves. I had built good relationships with the employees here. They always treated me with respect. Judging by their reactions, they were likely on my side. A high school graduate thinks they can give me orders? How shameless. Michael yelled at Emily, his voice booming. Emily's body trembled at his outburst, but she didn't avert her gaze from him. At that moment, the branch manager's furious voice rang out. Don't you get it yet? If Steve closes his $20 billion account, do you think we can handle that fallout? It would be the biggest scandal in this bank's history. Michael's face was filled with unease now that he realized the gravity of the $20 billion account closure. Fear was creeping in. I let out a small chuckle and said, I'm sure Michael has a brilliant plan in case a high school graduate like me closes my account. After all, he's a college graduate with a very sharp mind. Is that true, Michael? The branch manager's question made Michael look even more distressed. Well, that's only natural. Sure, Michael is an assistant branch manager and probably earns a decent salary, but that doesn't mean he has enough savings to cover $20 billion. I looked at him as he mumbled incoherently, unable to form a response, and said, The reason my office has amassed $20 billion in assets is because of multiple income streams, consulting fees, royalties, and so on. But more importantly, it's because of constant hard work. I've worked hard enough to overcome the fact that I'm a high school graduate. There have been other executives like Michael who looked down on me because of my background, but I earned their respect by using my knowledge to propose effective tax-saving strategies for their companies. I kept presenting solutions they didn't even know existed. Naturally, those same executives grew to trust me deeply. But this level of expertise didn't come overnight. I pulled all-nighters studying desperately. And even after opening my office, every day has been filled with studying. Not a single day passed where I didn't study tax law. I've overcome the barriers of education through my own hard work and dedication. Yet Michael still refused to accept it. You talk about effort, but isn't it because you and Emily failed your college entrance exams that you're only high school graduates? Compared to college grads, high school grads study way less. No matter what you say, you're losers. Michael sneered, his lips curling as he hurled his insults. When it came to studying, it was obvious that I had put in far more hours than Michael ever had. That's because I'd sacrificed all my personal time to dedicate myself to learning. Yet Michael only valued the hours spent studying in school. You're still saying that nonsense? The branch manager held his head in his hands, clearly exasperated by Michael's remarks. Even the branch manager must have realized that Michael's total study time was far less than mine. So, Michael, you're saying that being a college graduate makes you a winner? That your life is so much better than mine? I asked him point blank. Michael let out a smug snort and, as if it were obvious, replied confidently, Do you really need to ask if I'm a winner? I graduated from college and became an assistant branch manager at this major institution, Trinity Bank. I'm not like people who can't fit into an organization like you. It's because I experienced group life all the way through college that I can thrive as part of a team. Michael spoke as if running a private office like mine meant I was an outcast who couldn't function in a structured organization. Without flinching, I calmly asked him right away, Oh, really? So you're saying all high school graduates are losers? Even if they earn more than you, they're still worthless? Michael replied instantly, Of course. Without a degree, their worth is zero. Actually, it's in the negative compared to college graduates. You're a burden to society. And Emily over there, she's a high school graduate too, which means she's incompetent and incapable of doing a decent job. That's awful. Emily gave Michael a scornful look. Her tears had completely dried, and her eyes were no longer wet.
She had clearly decided that she wouldn't let Michael keep saying whatever he wanted anymore. I looked Michael in the eye and said, "There's no one as capable as Emily at the seminars. Her attention to detail with the participants is remarkable, and she answers any questions she can with care and precision. In fact, she might have more passion for her work than you do, Michael." "Steve." Emily looked at me with what seemed like admiration in her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous." Hearing me suggest that Emily was more competent than him seemed to push Michael's frustration to its limit. "So let me ask you again, do you still believe that high school graduates are incompetent?" If this made Michael reconsider, that would be ideal, but I doubted it. His pride in his academic background was unshakable. And just as I expected, Michael gave exactly the answer I predicted. Of course, high school graduates have no value in society. They're losers, incapable, and useless. I smirked and glanced toward the branch manager. "Well, you heard him, branch manager." "What?" Michael seemed bewildered that I had turned the conversation toward the branch manager. He stood there slack-jawed, looking utterly ridiculous. The branch manager glared at Michael. Then, after a long sigh, he delivered a bombshell revelation. "My wife is also a high school graduate. So are you saying that she is a useless loser too?" Michael, wait, no, I didn't mean... Michael clearly hadn't expected his boss's wife to be a high school graduate. He was visibly shaken. "That's not what I meant." He tried to deny it, but his darting eyes gave away his lie. "The reason I knew the branch manager's wife was a high school graduate is simple, because she was my classmate. Our high school was known for its high academic standards, and most students naturally went on to college. The only ones who chose to enter the workforce after graduation were me and the branch manager's wife. Because of that, we became close during our job service. Even after we became working professionals, we stayed in touch and exchanged emails from time to time. It was through one of our email exchanges that I found out she had married the branch manager. I was genuinely surprised. Never in my wildest dreams did I think she would marry the branch manager of the very bank branch where I used to work. Since then, the three of us, the branch manager, his wife, and I, had developed a close friendship. Because of that connection, I had entrusted all $2 billion of my assets to Trinity Bank. Not only as a client, but also as a seminar speaker, I had built a mutually beneficial relationship with the branch. I never would have guessed that the branch manager's wife is a high school graduate. Michael muttered in disbelief. Of course, the branch manager wouldn't go around sharing his wife's academic background with others. So it was understandable that no one knew. The other bank employees looked equally stunned. "So what's your verdict? Is my wife a loser after all? And since I married her, does that make me a loser too?" The room's atmosphere dropped to absolute zero. The employees around us stayed silent, watching the exchange intently. It wasn't the kind of situation where anyone could laugh or chat. It felt like the air had turned heavy, like a funeral. Seeing the reactions around him, Michael's face turned ghostly pale. "I didn't mean to insult your wife. Branch manager, your wife is a homemaker, right? If she's not part of the workforce, she's still a winner. Even if she's a high school graduate, isn't she?" Michael desperately tried to explain himself, but he was only making things worse. Wow. I couldn't help but cringe at his self-destructive remark. The branch manager's gaze remained cold and unmoving as he stared at Michael. There was no way Michael could recover from this. "I'm looking forward to the next personnel review." The branch manager's words, hinting at a possible demotion, made Michael's face drain of all color. "No, my winning life." Michael clutched his head and collapsed forward. He remained still, with his hands and knees pressed to the floor. I looked down at him and said, "Academic background isn't everything. What matters is how much effort you put into your work after you graduate. Some people, like Emily and me, had circumstances that prevented them from pursuing higher education, even if they wanted to. What matters most is how you rise after you've fallen." Leaving Michael still frozen in place, I spoke. "I'll be heading out now. I'll follow up about the account closure later." "Understood. I sincerely apologize for everything. We will make sure Michael is properly held accountable." The branch manager's firm words made me nod in approval. Then I walked out of the restaurant. After that incident, Michael was dismissed from Trinity Bank. It turned out later that he had many skeletons in his closet. The internal investigation revealed that, besides Emily, there were numerous other compliance violations by Michael. Due to his academic elitism, Michael's poor treatment wasn't limited to high school graduate employees. He was also harsh toward employees from lesser-known universities. He forced them to handle an overwhelming amount of work that kept them working late into the night, without overtime pay. Moreover, even when the employees managed to complete the tasks through sheer effort, Michael's attitude was utterly appalling. "I don't waste my time reviewing work done by incompetence," he would say, as he tore up the documents submitted by those employees. He was even worse because he would exaggerate his praise for documents prepared by employees from prestigious universities, even if their work was poorly done. He was also found to have given unfair performance evaluations to employees with lower academic backgrounds. As a result, many of them didn't receive fair salary increases. The internal investigation also revealed that Michael had planned to give Emily and others similarly low evaluations. No matter how capable someone was, Michael judged them solely based on their academic credentials. A person like that is unfit to be in a leadership position. Beyond the academic discrimination, several other violations came to light, leading to his dismissal. Following the incident, numerous complaints surfaced from Michael's former branch as well. The complaints all came from employees who had faced unjust treatment because of their educational background. Some employees, like me, had even left Trinity Bank altogether because of Michael. The loss of talented employees who could have thrived in the organization was a significant blow to the bank. In addition, Trinity Bank had to compensate employees who had been unfairly denied raises, which became a major undertaking. It was inevitable they had to review performance evaluations going back several years. Because of this, Michael was forced to forego his severance pay. The internal investigation required extra staff, leading to additional labor costs. Because of this, the bank decided to offset Michael's severance package against the costs incurred and chose not to pursue legal damages against him. For Michael, losing his severance pay must have been devastating. After causing such a mess, it was unlikely he'd find another job anytime soon. It turned out that Michael had been married, but his wife left him and filed for divorce after the incident. Living with someone as prideful as Michael must have been unbearable for her. Moreover, Michael was unemployed and had no severance pay, leaving him completely without money. To someone like Michael, having no money likely meant having no worth. Michael, who had been so obsessed with being a winner, was now a loser in life. Even with his college degree, Michael had lost everything. He could no longer be considered a winner. But that was the life he chose for himself. I could only hope that he'd take this opportunity to reflect and grow from his mistakes. In the end, I decided not to close my $2 billion account and continue doing business with the first branch. The only issue at the first branch was Michael, and the other employees had done nothing wrong. Plus, the branch manager had desperately tried to convince me to stay. So I decided not to close my account and kept my assets there. However, I chose to step down from my role as a seminar speaker for Trinity Bank. Despite the branch manager's repeated attempt to persuade me otherwise, I couldn't forgive Michael's disparaging remarks about high school educated tax consultants. So I gave up the seminar role and decided to spend that freed up time studying even more. And I gained a powerful ally. One day, as I was diligently working on clients' financial report for this month's tax filing, I heard a familiar voice. "Steve, let's take a break. You've also got a client appointment at 3 p.m. "Oh, I forgot. Thanks." I smiled and called out to Emily. Since then, Emily had left Trinity Bank and started working at my office as a tax consultant assistant. It seemed seeing me in action inspired her to pursue a career as a professional. Now, she's learning while working by my side. I was surprised when she told me she resigned from Trinity Bank. But as always, Emily's attention to detail and support have been invaluable to me. I don't know what our future holds. However, I believe that the unpredictability of life is what makes it exciting. I'm still in my prime, and I plan to keep working hard, so I won't be outdone by the next generation. 300 lunches in boxes? I've never placed such an order. It must have been a hoax call. It's your fault for bringing them without first making sure. I'm not going to pay for this." Thomas, the sales manager, slammed the door shut on the woman who operated a box lunch takeout business and stated icily, "Just take them back and leave." The shop owner was visibly shocked and stood still in the snow-covered parking lot, holding all those packed lunches. At that moment, I made my first trip back to headquarters in 3 years. I was so taken aback to see her standing there that I hurried to greet her. She was the same person who had previously given our business the trade secret for a special miso. Our company's performance significantly improved as a result of that miso being a best-selling product. It was the pivotal moment that enabled me to advance in my career. It was quite distressing to see this woman, who had been such a kind gift, standing there stunned and defenseless, and I knew I had to do something to assist her. During our conversation, I discovered that Thomas's name had been used to place the order for the 300 box lunches, and I realized the entire situation at that very time. Thomas had a well-known history of sexual harassment and had a history of generating trouble by exploiting his position to approach women. Thomas had previously made several advances on the shop owner, who was well known for her attractiveness, but had always been turned down. I had no doubt that Thomas had planned this silly trap to punish her for resisting him. I promised to buy all the box lunches and give them to every employee in the company immediately in order to save her from this predicament. Thomas was clearly shaken when he witnessed the ostensibly canceled box lunches being distributed to everyone. I softly walked up to the agitated Thomas and firmly stated, "I know exactly what you did." I had a suspicion that some of Thomas's close associates were also up to no good. I thus started looking into what they had done and made a determined effort to see that justice was done. Daniel Thompson is my name. My age is 36. The Japanese sake manufacturer Timberlake Brewery, which has its headquarters in the northern coastal region of central Japan, employs me as a sales agent. Founded between 1603 and 1868 during the Edo period, Timberlake Brewery has a rich history. It is renowned for using the best rice cultivated in the area to make premium sake. Although there is a lot of snowfall in this area during the winter, the rivers that are close by and are nourished by the pristine snowmelt are considered to be some of Japan's best water sources. The sake produced here, which combines premium water and rice, has earned multiple gold medals in national competitions. Every year, when Timberlake Brewery holds its annual release event, fans gather from across Japan. Even today, Timberlake Brewery is a respected local institution and continues to play a vital role in supporting the regional economy. I was born and raised in this region, and I grew up with Timberlake Brewery as a familiar part of my life. Now 30 years old, I've always been a fan of Timberlake Brewery, and getting my hands on their fresh new sake each year during the release event is one of my greatest pleasures. Since I work in sales, I have to prioritize delivering new sake to customers and clients during the release season, but the company sells it to employees at a special price. It's not just me. Most employees buy the new sake for themselves or as gifts for their sake-loving family, relatives, or friends. Recently, as Japanese sake has gained more international recognition, more overseas visitors have been coming, and our export volume has been increasing every year. Because of that, people now say it's become harder to get our sake than it used to be, and our longtime customers often ask if we can boost production. Every time I explain, I feel the same, but increasing the scale of sake production isn't easy, and I try to help them understand. Sake is made by fermenting rice with a special mold called koji inside wooden barrels, under the guidance of master brewers who inherit the craft. It requires delicate adjustments based on intuition, so there's a limit to how much can be managed. Beer, for example, is well suited for mass production, with big factories churning it out year-round regardless of season. But that's not the case for sake. Each year's rice and water conditions are slightly different, and creating the perfect environment for koji mold to work requires craftsmanship that can't be standardized. While beer can be mass-produced by controlling temperature and pressure to maintain quality, no such large-scale method exists for sake. Not yet, anyway. Even after fermentation, sake needs to be aged for a certain period. This aging period usually lasts for several months, and the barrels must be made of natural wood that allows the mold to breathe, making industrial-scale production very difficult. Also, to produce good-tasting sake, you need to maintain the koji mold in excellent condition. It's not enough to just control the temperature and time. Only an experienced master brewer can properly assess and manage the living koji mold, and many steps in the process simply cannot be reduced to a manual. This inability to standardize, and the fact that even sake from the same brewery tastes different each year depending on the master brewer's intuition, is what makes sake so deep and compelling. That's why people look forward to the unique flavor of each year. To be honest, when I was younger, I admired the master brewer's craft and once considered becoming an apprentice. But at Timberlake Brewery, there has long been a tradition of selecting master brewers from certain families, making it difficult for outsiders to join. There are several families in the region with a history of producing master brewers, and every few years someone particularly gifted from those families is chosen as the next master. However, it's not as though the role has been monopolized by those bloodlines for centuries. When a talented young person came from outside the region, they were sometimes adopted into a brewer's family and trained to take over. So the bloodline hasn't been preserved purely. Still, many in the region place great importance on that tradition. When I expressed my desire to become a brewer, I was told if you're serious, you'll need to be adopted into a qualified family. That's when I gave up on the dream. Even so, times may change, and perhaps future generations will choose brewers based on skill rather than family background. In any case, even if I couldn't become a brewer, I still wanted to work at Timberlake Brewery. So I joined the company and have since been working as a salesperson, steadily producing results. This is now my 9th year since graduating from college and starting work, and I've become a capable salesperson. These days, I'm even developing and proposing strategies to help grow the company. Timberlake Brewery's flagship product is, of course, sake. But as I mentioned earlier, the production volume of sake is limited, and while we've gradually increased output over the years, it's not something we can simply double. This is partly due to the complexity of management, but also because there are limits to how much rice and river water we can source. The scale at which Timberlake Brewery can grow as a sake producer is inherently constrained. As someone born here, I would be satisfied if this brewery simply continued at a steady pace, preserving its traditions. But as an employee, I can't afford to be so relaxed about it. In today's world, companies are expected to grow even a little every year. And if our operations stay the same, financial management becomes a challenge. I sometimes feel this dependence on constant financial growth reveals a flaw in modern capitalism. Long ago, when regions lived almost self-sufficiently, businesses could survive by simply meeting the needs of their local communities. But now that economies are connected to other regions and even other countries, companies are forced to grow whether they want to or not. Still, it doesn't help to question the flow of the times from the standpoint of a single individual. As a salesperson for Timberlake Brewery, I've resolved to take whatever actions are necessary to help the company stay stable. That's why I began to focus on the idea of using koji mold to create foods other than sake. As I mentioned before, our company has been making sake with koji mold for a long time, and we've developed deep expertise in handling it. Koji mold is used not only in Japan but also throughout Southeast Asia to make essential foods like miso, soy sauce, vinegar, and pickles. This almost magical microorganism exists only in regions like Japan and has been used since ancient times. What's interesting is that even though the mold is the same, the flavor of the resulting product changes based on how and where it's fermented, creating unique local tastes. There was a time in rural Japan when families made their own miso at home. I've heard that even when neighbors made miso using the same ingredients at the same time, the taste differed from house to house. That's why sake from the same brewery can taste different every year. Adjustments made by the master brewer, relying on intuition and experience, bring out new flavors. I find koji mold to be truly fascinating. So it was only natural for me to consider expanding our business by utilizing koji mold's diverse capabilities. This region produces rice and water good enough for premium's sake. If we harness that to make popular foods like miso, soy sauce, and pickles, we could evolve from a brewery into a full-fledged food manufacturer. I started talking about this idea shortly after I joined the company, seeking out colleagues who might be willing to support it. At first, senior employees scolded me, saying, "We're a sake maker, so rookies like you shouldn't indulge in wild fantasies." But I had no intention of recklessly expanding the business. Even before I joined, our sake had started reaching overseas markets, and locals were already saying, Timberlake Brewery's sake has become so scarce and expensive, we can't drink it casually anymore. As someone who grew up here, I felt strongly that it wasn't right for our town's residents to be deprived of our sake. While wealthy overseas customers bought it all up, though the company's revenue has steadily increased each year, that's mostly due to rising sake prices. Actual production has only grown slightly. From a numbers perspective, Timberlake Brewery might seem to be thriving, but in reality, it's just that affluent customers are willing to pay more. It's not right for a company to grow distant from the local community just because it can still profit by appealing to wealthy clients from far away. Isn't that a sign that something at the core of the company is becoming distorted? That was the doubt that first arose in me when I was still a rookie. But it's nearly impossible for one person to stop the premiumization and export of sake. After much thought and internal debate, I came up with the idea of producing goods other than sake. Miso, soy sauce, and pickles have long been made by ordinary households, and unlike sake, they're not difficult to produce. Our technical team's expertise with Kuji mode is unmatched, so if we really committed to it, we could supply a wide range of products to our local community. If expanding our operations this way could also rebuild our connection with the region, it would be the most meaningful work imaginable. I firmly believed that and kept spreading the idea within the company despite often being scolded. Several years passed, and eventually a few colleagues began to support my vision. Around that time, I had an encounter that would change the course of my life. At 25 years old and still single, I was working late nights and living off half-price boxed meals from the supermarket just before closing. It was ironic that a man who dreamed of turning Timberlake Brewery into a food company was too busy to care about his own meals. I simply didn't have the energy to cook after work. Then a colleague told me about a small takeout place near the company that had opened recently and was known for its delicious food. I heard that many employees from our company were going there at lunchtime to buy side dishes. Since I was usually out on sales visits during the day, I couldn't go at lunch, but I figured I could stop by after work. One night around 9 p.m., I happened to walk past the takeout place and noticed the lights were still on, so I peeked inside. A young woman, who seemed to be the shop owner, was cleaning up. Although the shop had already closed, I always wanted to try the food there. So I decided to call out from the entrance, hoping she might still have something left. "Excuse me? I know you're probably closed, but if there's anything left, would you be willing to sell it to me? I'm happy to pay full price." When she looked up, I was a little surprised by how young she was. She looked like she was younger than me. After thinking for a moment, she said, "Please wait a moment," and disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, she returned with a pack containing some pickles and salad. Grateful that she was willing to sell me something after hours, I took out my wallet, but she stopped me and said, "These were made for lunch and have been kept in the fridge, but technically they're past our designated selling time, so I can't sell them. You're welcome to take them as they are." I said, "I can't accept that. I'm the one who made an unreasonable request after hours, and if they were refrigerated, they should still be perfectly fine. I'll pay full price." But she'd already removed the price tags, so it was not easy to put them back on now. Still, I can't just take food made by someone else without paying. What if I start showing up around this time every day expecting free food? Someone who would do that probably wouldn't say it out loud, don't you think? Be that as it may, I just can't accept someone's hard work for free. She replied, "I appreciate the sentiment, but these have already passed our internal storage time limit and technically have no product value anymore, so there's no reason for me to accept payment. I eat expired box meals all the time and never once had an upset stomach. I've got a strong digestive system, so to me they're still well worth paying for." She gave me a slightly amused look as I insisted on paying. After a pause, she finally said, "All right, then please accept these. But if you like how they taste, please come back during regular hours and buy something next time. Consider this a sample." The sample? Well, if you put it that way, I don't want to take up any more of your time arguing here, so I'll accept this, but I will be back during business hours next time. Saying that, I bowed deeply and left the shop with the pack in my hands. Even at that point, I had already decided I would come back, no matter how the food tasted, just to repay her kindness. But the moment I took a bite of the salad at home, I was embarrassed that I had even thought about returning just out of obligation. The salad was nothing like the supermarket food I usually ate because the seasoning was completely different and the vegetables had a crisp freshness. I found myself saying out loud, "This is amazing." The pickles were just as impressive. They reminded me of the ones my grandmother used to make when I was a kid, and I hadn't thought of those in years. Not only were the ingredients fresh, but the balance of salt and flavor was perfect. I was truly impressed that this young woman had made them. The next day, I skipped lunch to save time and finished my work early so I could visit the takeout place again. This time, the shop was still open when I arrived, and as I walked in, I made eye contact with the owner just as she finished helping another customer. "Oh, you're here early today." I was impressed with the sample, so I came as promised. After exchanging greetings, I bought far more food than I could possibly eat in one sitting. That day, I also tried some fried and simmered dishes. They were all so good that I ended up eating even what I planned to save for the next day and had to lie down until I digested it all. From that point on, I became a regular at her shop, unless it was her day off. I found a way to visit at least every other day. Eventually, I learned her name was Kayla, and she was 2 years younger than me. One day, when I happened to stop by with no other customers around, I finally asked something I had been wondering about. "Do you make all the food here yourself?" "Yes. I get vegetables directly from a local farmer who practices organic farming, and I prepare everything myself." "Even the pickles?" "Yes. Pickles and miso were my grandmother's specialties, and she spent years teaching me. I'm confident in those. I can only make pickles right now, but I'd love to start making miso if I ever get the time." The moment she said that, the idea hit me. What if we had her develop dishes for us at our company? Once I get an idea, I tend to act on it right away. That's just how I am. So I immediately started talking to colleagues about it. Many of them were already fans of Kayla's takeout place and welcomed the idea of promoting this local flavor. But the plan didn't go as smoothly as I had initially hoped. The biggest obstacle was Kayla herself. She wasn't on board. I really appreciate the offer, but I do this because I love cooking and serving people I can see face to face. Going into a big company like Timberlake Brewery and acting like some kind of director just isn't my style. Kayla's reasoning was completely fair. After all, the idea had come entirely from me, and I had no right to push it. Still, I couldn't let go of the desire to incorporate her unique sense of flavor into our company's products. So, one day I made a new proposal. "I think you should keep making prepared foods here, just like always. But would you be willing to teach us how to make miso instead? We'll provide the equipment and staff." "What?" She had often said she wanted to make miso if she had the time, but she hadn't been able to make it happen. "I can guarantee that your pickles are good enough to be turned into a brand. And if the miso you learned from your grandmother is anything like that, it'll be top quality, too. If you could teach that method to our technicians, I think we could make something amazing." After thinking it over for a few days, Kayla agreed, "But I have a condition. I'll teach you my grandmother's method, but that's all I'm willing to do." "What do you mean by that?" "I don't want our shop name used in the product branding. I want it sold under Timberlake Brewery's name." "Oh, so you don't want any name attached to it. That's totally fine. We won't do anything that would bring you unwanted attention, and I don't want to receive any payment or claim any rights for this. Please make that clear." "What?" She insisted that she was willing to share what her grandmother taught her, but she had no intention of profiting from it or making it into some kind of intellectual property. "But if we don't compensate you, then we're just taking your knowledge for free. That's not right. Then forget the whole thing." I only agreed because I didn't want my grandmother's recipes to fade away. I never intended to use what she gave me for money or recognition. After some thought, I decided to accept her terms. "Then all I'll ask is that you visit our factory a few times to teach us how to make the miso. After that, we'll take full responsibility and we won't involve you any further." Normally, an arrangement like this wouldn't even count as a proper contract, and maybe it shouldn't. But Kayla's desire to feed people something delicious and my wish to bring new food products to our region aligned perfectly. So This one-time agreement came together almost miraculously. Of course, the project didn't become a business overnight. I started by proposing it as a new initiative within the company, persuading upper management to approve a small investment in equipment, and we managed to set up a small miso aging barrel inside the factory. Kayla came to the factory a few times and worked with our technicians to make the miso. I had selected staff who had some personal experience with miso making, and the collaboration went very smoothly. Kayla not only passed on her grandmother's method to our team, but also learned new techniques from our mold handling experts, which made her very happy. We paid her only for transportation and a modest token of appreciation, but she said, "They taught me techniques I can use in pickle making too," and seemed truly satisfied. Her smile, so full of joy simply from learning more about koji mold, left a lasting impression on me. I can't believe someone this selfless still exists in today's world. As someone who had grown used to chasing sales targets and numbers every day, meeting Kayla at that point in my life had a profound impact on me. At any rate, the trial batch of miso turned out to be a success. The finished product was so good, it stunned even our seasoned brewers. This would win a gold medal in a competition. One technician said with admiration. Kayla was also amazed. Working with professionals and top-grade equipment really makes a difference. "It's much more refined than what I made at home," she said. At first, the management had only reluctantly approved the project because of my persistence. But the moment they tasted the miso, they changed their tune and began preparing for mass production. While the company was abuzz with excitement, Kayla quietly withdrew and returned to her daily life at her takeout place, her true domain. Knowing that this was exactly what she wanted, I continued to visit her shop as a regular customer, but never brought up anything related to business. Later, some employees questioned whether it was really okay not to give Kayla any rights. Each time, I had to explain her personality and the nature of our agreement. Most eventually came to understand, but a few people made rude and cynical remarks. She says that now, but what if she later claims we stole her techniques and causes a big scene? These days, people stir up controversy on purpose to go viral. Some employees who are active on social media would say such things. When I caught wind of such rumors, I tracked down the sources and calmly explained the facts, dispelling their doubts. Social media is a useful tool, but if you dive too deep into it, it starts to warp your perception, and you end up questioning everyone's motives and forgetting how to take people at their word. Also, because Kayla was young and attractive, some people had improper intentions toward her. The worst of them all was Thomas, the sales manager. Thomas was 10 years older than me and my direct supervisor. But to be honest, there was nothing I could learn from him professionally. He had joined the sales department under the absurd belief that working for a well-known brewery meant he could succeed even while slacking off. He had no passion for work and instead channeled all his energy into chasing women. Rumor had it he spent his weekends blowing money at clubs, and shortly before I joined the company, he had repeatedly harassed younger female employees. So he came close to being disciplined. I don't know the specifics of what he did, but if he pulled the same stunts in today's compliance-focused environment, he would have been fired instantly. Thomas was said to know the nightlife scene well, and often entertained clients or higher-ups by taking them to exclusive spots, which supposedly helped him maintain favor despite his poor work ethic. I didn't want to believe it, but maybe it was this shady network of his that allowed him to stay in his role as manager despite everything. And of course, there was no way Thomas wouldn't notice Kayla entering and leaving the office. She wore almost no makeup, perhaps because she handled food, but her sharp features made her strikingly beautiful, and Thomas quickly fixated on her, asking, "Who's that woman?" with a creepy level of interest. However, Thomas was widely disliked by the traditional craftsmen on the production floor. Whenever he showed up without a reason, the senior workers would chase him out in anger, which ultimately kept him from getting close to Kayla. After that incident, the persistent Thomas reportedly began showing up uninvited at Kayla's takeout place, using increasingly rude and coercive language to try and get her to go out with him. I didn't know the exact details of what happened, but knowing Thomas, he probably said something along the lines of, "I'm a manager at Timberlake Brewery. You owe us, don't you?" in an attempt to intimidate her into compliance. But Kayla, who had once firmly declared she didn't want money or rights for teaching us how to make miso, would never give in to such lowly manipulation. More likely, Thomas got sharp rebuke and was thoroughly humiliated in the process. The fact that he, who always clung to any woman he fixated on, stopped showing up at Kayla's takeout place altogether after that point was proof enough. I had been prepared to intervene if Thomas pushed things too far. But in the end, there was no need. Still, around that time, I had one awkward exchange with him regarding Kayla. "What's going on between you and that woman?" "You mean Kayla? She just came to the company as a miso production advisor." "Don't give me that. You're telling me you got to know a woman that gorgeous and didn't make a move." "I don't think it's appropriate to speak like that. If someone overheard you, they might call it sexist. You could land yourself in trouble." "What is wrong with you? Are you one of those guys who worries about every word he says just to please women? Pathetic. You call yourself a man? You had the perfect opportunity with a woman like that, and you just let it go. This country really is doomed." With that, Thomas stormed off, his footsteps loud and angry. What does my attitude toward women have to do with the future of the country? I was so taken aback by Thomas's childish, thoughtless behavior that I couldn't even get angry. Witnessing such a disgraceful display from someone older and supposedly in a supervisory position only made me respect Kayla's dignified presence even more. Age, gender, and title. Those things don't matter. What matters is what a person thinks and how they act. Right now, that's everything. That's what I believed, and I resolved to keep my own actions in check with that principle in mind. Later, the miso we released became a surprise hit, first spreading locally, then becoming a national sensation thanks to people sharing it on social media. The company launched a project to expand nationwide sales and appointed me, the originator of the idea, as the sales lead. With great enthusiasm, I poured everything into the project and worked on increasing production while maintaining quality. By the time I was in my 30s, the MSO sales were rivaling those of our sake. The company built additional factory space and opened a new sales office in Tokyo. I was assigned to head the Tokyo office, leading efforts to distribute Timberlake miso nationwide. Before leaving for Tokyo, I visited Kayla, but I didn't mention that I owe my promotion to her. I simply said I was being transferred. She seemed to understand everything from that alone and replied with a gentle smile, "That's wonderful. Please keep doing your best." I responded, "You stay well, too. When I come back here, I'll definitely buy your food again," and left her shop with a bag full of boxed meals. By then, I was 33 years old. Over the next 3 years, I worked tirelessly in Tokyo and managed to multiply our miso sales several times over. Recently, we began producing soy sauce made from our miso as a base, which quickly gained popularity, and Timberlake soy sauce became a recognized brand in its own right. Now, the combined sales of miso and soy sauce had surpassed sake by several times, and there were even rumors that Timberlake Brewery might rebrand itself as Timberlake Fermented Foods in the near future. It was during that time that I returned to headquarters in this region for the first time in 3 years to deal with an important matter. The season had just turned into the new year, and the town was blanketed in snow, a familiar scene that stirred a deep sense of homecoming in me. Carefully navigating the snowy roads, I finally parked my car and stepped out, breathing a sigh of relief, until I noticed someone standing at the edge of the lot. If it had just been a person walking by, I wouldn't have thought much of it. But this figure was standing completely still, not moving an inch. Snow had begun to pile lightly on their shoulders and head, and it had clearly been falling on them for quite some time. They must have been standing there for several minutes, maybe even longer. Are they waiting for someone? Even so, they should be under a roof or inside a car to stay warm. I walked closer and called out, but the person facing away from me didn't respond. So I approached further until I was close enough to reach out and touch their shoulder. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" I said, raising my voice. At that, the person suddenly turned around, and I found myself staring at a face I could never forget. "Kayla, what are you doing here in the snow?" "Daniel, you're back?" she asked in a strangely calm tone. But when I saw how pale and blue her lips were, I couldn't respond with equal calm. "You're freezing." You need to get somewhere warm right now. I tried to guide her toward the company building, but she resisted, saying, I don't want to go inside. I pointed to my car, but she said, I have my own, gesturing toward a nearby compact van. It was hard to see under the snow, but the side bore the name of her takeout place, and it was her delivery vehicle. Fine, let's just get somewhere warm. I hurried her over to the van, brushed off the snow, and practically pushed her inside. I got in on the passenger side, started the engine, and turned on the heater. Warm air began blowing out immediately, and I finally felt a bit of relief. But Kayla remained silent, staring down. I checked the fuel gauge. It was nearly full. So it wasn't a case of running out of gas. Even if it had been, standing outside without calling for help didn't make sense. What happened? Well, seeing Kayla so downcast after all this time shocked me, and I felt I had to put aside my business at the company to find out what had happened. I patiently encouraged her to talk, determined to learn why she had been standing there all alone. She explained that after I left for Tokyo, she had continued running her takeout place steadily and now employed 2 staff members. She had purchased this van last year to start offering delivery services, an indication of how well her business was doing. Timberlake Brewery's employees still bought from her shop daily, and recently, delivering dozens of lunches to the company had become routine. Today, there was going to be a company-wide gathering. So, we received an order for 300 box lunches. 300. That's basically everyone at headquarters. I came today for that meeting, too, but I didn't know lunch was being provided. I thought that might be the case. What do you mean? One of my employees took the phone order. I came to deliver the lunches, but I was told they hadn't been ordered and was turned away. What? You were told to take back 300 box lunches? I turned to look behind me, and the van's back was filled with thermal containers, clearly holding a massive amount of food. It was my fault. I should have double-checked whether such a large order was really placed by Timberlake Brewery. Even if I try to sell these now, I'd be lucky to move 10. The rest will go to waste and we'll take a loss. And to waste so much food from the farmers who provided it. I just stood there thinking about that, and I didn't notice anything until you spoke to me. As I listened to Kayla and saw the anguish on her face, I began to notice several suspicious details. Whose name was on the order? It was Thomas's. That's why both my staff member and I assumed it was legitimate. We never imagined it might be a prank. But are you sure it was a fake order? Could have been a real order that someone at reception refused by mistake? No, because Thomas himself came out and said, I never placed that order. Take it back. He told me it was my fault for not confirming, and I couldn't argue. Something's not right here. Whoever placed the call clearly knew there would be a company-wide meeting today. Only someone close to the company would have known that. Also, it doesn't make sense for Thomas to come to the front himself. As far as I know, someone as arrogant as Thomas wouldn't bother coming out himself just because reception told him the takeout place owner had arrived, especially not just to turn them away. If he really hadn't known about the order, he would have simply said, I don't know anything about that. Tell them to leave. And hung up the phone. There was something really off about the way he came out and confronted Kayla directly. Can I ask? Did Thomas just tell you to leave, or did he say anything else? When I asked her that, she trembled and replied in a barely audible voice, Yes, he did. What exactly did he say? He said he might accept the order depending on the conditions. And what were those conditions? He said I had to meet him personally and make time for him. I had suspected as much, but hearing it from Kayla filled me with a surge of fury I could barely contain. That man, he's still pulling this kind of garbage. Kayla flinched at the tension in my voice. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you, and I'm sorry for pressing you to say something so difficult. But now I understand the situation. Please don't worry. I'll take full responsibility for these box lunches. What? There really is a meeting today. I'll have them distributed to everyone. For those who already have meals, I'll tell them to take these home. As long as they're eaten today, it'll be fine, right? Yes, of course. But the money? I didn't want to say this to you, but I've done pretty well for myself in Tokyo. Oh! So I can pay for this out of my own pocket if I have to. And honestly, I probably won't have to in the end. Are you sure? I don't want you to strain yourself just for me. I'm not straining myself, and I'm certainly not lying. You know me well enough. Kayla, you know that when I say something this firmly, it's because I mean every word. When I said that with a smile, Kayla finally let her expression soften. That's right. You've always been the kind of person who never backs down once you've made up your mind. But you never made empty promises either. You always followed through like you did when we made that miso. Exactly. I owe a big part of my success to the miso you taught me how to make. So, as someone who benefited from that, I'd like to return the favor. Just let me handle this. Okay. All right. If you insist that much, I'll leave the rest to you. But if it turns out you really can't buy them after all, please don't hesitate to tell me. I will, but don't worry, that's not going to happen. After that, I had Kayla bring her van to the building's entrance, and we transferred all the box lunches inside. Then, I told her to return to her shop before the snow got worse. I contacted reception and asked for a few junior employees to help carry the box lunches to the assembly hall. Soon the meeting began, and about 300 employees gathered. Following my instructions, box lunches were handed out at the entrance to each attendee. Most assumed it was a company-provided service and accepted it without question. But one man stood out, and he clutched his box lunch nervously, looking around with suspicion. Of course, it was Thomas. I walked up to him and spoke. Thomas, you look like you're dying to know why those box lunches are being distributed. Oh, Mr. Thompson, soon to be president. What an honor. It's strange to hear you speak to me like that. Wasn't just a while ago that you used to yell at me over every little thing? Please don't tease me like that. It's only natural to speak with respect to someone who's about to become president, right? As he said that, Thomas quite literally rubbed his hands together, bent at the waist, and glanced up at me, trying to read my expression. He looked like a groveling manager, straight out of a comedy show, and I fixed it with a cold, unflinching stare. Just as he said, I had been selected to take over as president of the company in the upcoming term in recognition of the success of our miso production and sales. One reason I had come to headquarters today was to formally announce this to staff. But before that, I felt it was necessary to clean house. It seemed someone in this company pulled a stunt by placing a fake order for those box lunches. Thomas, do you know anything about that? Dropping all pretense of politeness, I confronted him sharply. His face immediately drained of color. A fake order? There was such a thing? What's the matter? You're the one who turned her away, aren't you? Why act like you don't know anything? Ah, yes, that's right. She did bring a large order, but I didn't recall placing it. So I sent her away. Show me your phone. What? Just yesterday's call log will do. Show me now. If you refuse, I can get a warrant and request your phone records through legal channels. But that would cause quite a stir. Under pressure from my unrelenting tone, Thomas froze, pale and speechless. He must have realized that I already knew everything he'd done to Kayla. Reluctantly, he handed over his phone. The call history showed he had called a takeout, placed the previous afternoon. Sloppy. You made a call you didn't want anyone to know about, and you didn't even delete the log. Even if you were confident you wouldn't be suspected, not taking basic precautions proves you're unfit to be a department head. What are you talking about? Oh, still playing dumb. Fine. I have evidence that someone in this company committed a serious act of sexual harassment. No, that's too soft. From a legal standpoint, it may qualify as criminal intimidation. If the person involved confesses now, we might be able to handle it internally. But if not, I'll bring in outside investigators. And if what I've heard is confirmed, you'll face at minimum a formal dismissal and potentially criminal charges. Please don't involve the police. Sweating profusely, Thomas finally broke down and clung to me, panicked. Other employees were starting to watch, wondering what was going on, but Thomas seemed oblivious. You place a fake order with Kayla, then try to force her into a personal relationship. When she refused, you cancel the order, causing financial damage as retaliation. Are you ready to admit that? I admit it. I admit everything. Just please don't press criminal charges. Disgraceful. Kayla is the person who helped multiply our company's revenue, and you tried to extort her like that. In another era, I'd settle this with my own hands right here, but I'll restrain myself. Submit your resignation immediately. Your severance will be heavily reduced per our disciplinary policies, but I'll allow you to keep a fraction. However, let me be clear, if you ever so much as look at Kayla or any of our female employees again, I will destroy you with every legal tool available. If you don't want that, stick to relationships that require payment going forward. Thomas collapsed to the floor, shocked and silent. He was taken to the infirmary, but I continued as planned and announced my upcoming appointment as company president at the assembly. I briefly mentioned Thomas's resignation and wrapped up the matter. After taking office, I fired several executives who had close ties to Thomas. Thomas had long used his position to make vile demands of women in vulnerable positions. An investigation I led revealed that several of these executives had been complicit in some of those acts. I removed every executive who had even the slightest involvement and made it clear to all employees what would happen if such behavior were ever repeated. Only then did I launch the company's new leadership structure. As for the 300 box lunches, I deducted the full cost from the remainder of Thomas's severance. Just as I had anticipated, my own finances remained untouched. Since then, both our sake and miso continue to sell extremely well. I'm currently planning a new fermented food development project using koji mold. When the time comes, I hope to ask Kayla once again participate as an external advisor. However, even if Kayla agrees to be part of this project, there is a strong chance she won't accept any financial compensation, just like last time. The biggest dilemma I face as the newly appointed president is that I still can't think of the right way to prepare a token of gratitude that Kayla would actually be willing to accept. In any case, I intend to give my all to ensure that Timberlake Brewery continues to produce exceptional food and sake for years to come.